Advanced care planning refers to the documents that are written planning end of life care. Advanced directives are documents written that mention healthcare agents and living wills. Living wills are written or video statements stating the healthcare a person wishes. Medical orders are documents crafted by medical professionals for the ill patient. Examples of medical orders are DNRs and POLST, which is long-term end-of-life care. 75% of the world does not practice medicine in the same way, making how a healthcare professional treats and breaks bad news differently to each family. Western nations usually tell the full truth of the patient condition, no matter if it's really bad or a really good outcome. Outside Western cultures, doctors might conceal and hide things about a patient's conditions, as it seems worse for both the patient and the family for the doctor to say the full nature. In India, doctors withhold telling the patient crucial information due to the family not wanting them to. While in Germany, they are required by law to disclose every piece of information. Outside Northern cultures, family or community plays a main role, or decisions are made primarily by medical professionals, or the doctors, in concert with the family, make the decisions for the patients. Advanced directives outside Western cultures have pretty much no meaning whatsoever.
Euthanasia. Euthanasia is the act of taking one's life when suffering from a terminally ill or severe disability. It is divided into active and passive euthanasia. Active euthanasia is when you are intentionally causing death, while passive euthanasia occurs when life-sustaining support is withheld from patient. Physician-assisted dying is a form of active euthanasia whereby a patient prescribes the means by which a person can die. 9 U.S. states and D.C. allow for physician-assisted dying. Canada and several European countries, including Switzerland, Belgium, and many others, allow for physician-assisted dying. Physician-assisted dying is certainly controversial, with religious, legal, ethical, and medical experts weighing in on their opinions.
So now we're gonna talk about the religious practices after death. We're gonna start with the Roman Catholic. Um, the funeral in the Roman Catholic tradition consists of three parts. Funeral. First is the wake that usually occurs in a funeral parlor. The body is present, and prayers and eulogies are offered by the family and friends. The funeral mass is next, which includes an opening prayer, Bible reading, liturgy, communion, and a concluding rite. The funeral then moves to the ceremony where a blessing of the grave, scripture reading, and prayers conclude the funeral ritual. In Judaism, it's different. Among the Orthodox, the deceased is first washed and then wrapped in a simple white shroud. Males are also wrapped in their prayer shawls. Once shrouded, the body is placed in a plain wooden coffin. The burial must occur as soon as possible after death, and a simple service consists of prayers and eulogy is given. After a burial, the family members typically gather in one home, often that one of the deceased, and receive visitors. This is referred to as sitting Shiva. In Islam, the deceased are buried as soon as possible, and it is a requirement that the community be involved in the ritual. The individual is first washed and then wrapped in a plain white shroud called a kafan. Next, funeral prayers are said, followed by the burial. The shrouded dead are placed directly in the earth without a casket, and deep enough not to be disturbed. They are also positioned on the earth on the right side facing Mecca, which is Saudi Arabia. And last, we have the Hindu. The Hindu believe in reincarnation, and this accelerates the funeral ritual. And deceased Hindus are cremated as soon as possible because of that. After being washed, the body is anointed, dressed, and then placed on a stand decorated with flowers ready for cremation. Once the body has been cremated, the ashes are collected and, if possible, dispersed in one of India's holy rivers. So now we're gonna talk about the green burial. In the green burial, the body is neither cremated nor prepared with chemicals such as embalming fluids. It is simply placed in a biodegradable coffin or shroud and interred without a concrete burial vault. The gravesite is allowed to return to nature. The goal is is complete decomposition of the body and its natural return to the soil. These burials types of burials are not new. Most burials before the mid 19th century were conducted this way, as are many Jews and Muslims burial today. Green burials are enjoying a resurgence in popularity today for a few reasons. Number one is the simplicity. The idea of wrapping the body in a shroud or placing it in plain unadorned coffin appeals to those who prefer their burial arrangement to be simple. Um, Number two is the low cost. These types of burials, the green burials, are very cost effective. It's a good alternative to conventional burials, um, because it's lowering the cost by thousands of dollars. It also conserves natural resources. If you look at the statistics, the United States cemeteries bury over 30 million board feet and hardwood and 90 tons of steel in casket. With green burials, fewer resources are needed and used. It also eliminates hazardous chemicals. Um, for some, foregoing the embalming process is the main attraction. Since embalming fluids contain formaldehyde, which is a respiratory irritant and known carcinogen. Um, in the United States, about 5.3 million gallons of embalming fluids are used every year, and funeral home workers are exposed to it routinely. And it also preserves the natural areas. The burial sites restore and preserve a natural landscape.
Now, grief, bereavement, and mourning are terms that are commonly misunderstood. However, they have different meanings. Grief is the normal process of reacting to a loss. Grief can be in response to a physical loss such as death or a social loss, including a relationship or a job. Bereavement is the period after a loss during which grief and mourning occurs. The time spent in bereavement for the loss of a loved one depends on the circumstances of the loss and the level of attachment to the person who has died. Mourning is the process by which people adapt to a loss. Mourning is greatly influenced by cultural belief, practices, and rituals. Now, regarding the different process of grief, we have the dual process model. Describe grief as a process of moving between two modes or functioning. The loss orientation, where people focus on the emotions, usually sad or difficult, associated with their loss, and the restoration of orientation, where the people focus on the demands of reorganizing their life and returning to a more everyday task and issues. The model demonstrates that it's normal for people to move between the two modes, sometimes paying attention to the grief emotion and sometimes paying attention of being distracted of other life issues. It is only when people get stuck in either one mode or the other. Warden's task of mourning. William Warden developed the task of mourning in 2008. While they may sound similar to the stage of mourning or stage of grief, they are not a linear process and do not suggest that bereaved people should be at a certain stage in any given time frame. The task of mourning presents grief as an active process, whereby bereaved by people that need to accept the reality of their loss, feel and process the pain of their grief, adjust to a world without the person who has died, maintaining and enduring the connection with the person who has died even. Last, we have Tolkien's model of grief from 1996 challenged the idea that time heals all the wounds, or that grief disappears with the time even though it never goes away completely. Instead, this visual model describes a world where rather than expecting the grief to reduce or trying to shrink it, the life of the bereaved person actually grows around the grief, making new friends, having new experience, and beginning to look forward with the new possibilities of our example of growing around the grief.
Grief. Loss of children and parents mourning. Loss of a child is known to be the greatest pain. Parents suffer an increased risk of both physical and mental health and exhibit an increased mortality rate. Adult children dying in traffic accidents was associated with parents experiencing more intense grief and depression, greater symptoms on a health checklist, and more guilt than those parents whose adult children died from cancer. Which also means that sudden deaths hit harder than expected deaths. Loss of parents in adulthood. More common than the death of a child, which equals less suffering. It is kind of like saying it is more expected. A study showed that a father's death led to more negative effects for sons than daughters, while a mother's death led to more negative effects for the daughters. Loss of parents in childhood. Parental deaths in childhood have been associated with adjustment problems that may last in adulthood. Red flags should be monitored to watch over the child's mental health. Examples of red flags can include persistent difficulty about in talking about the dead person, persistent or destructive aggressive behavior, persisting anxiety, clinging, or fears, somatic complaints such as headaches. These are just some examples of red flags among many others. Children can be very confused, so it is important that children have someone who will listen to and accurately address their concerns.